Hey everyone, this is Pete, and as is probably clear by now, I love the MS-DOS era of PC gaming, and I'm delighted that with the increasing frequency of DOSBox wrapped re-releases on digital storefronts like GOG.com and Steam, along with community efforts such as the incredible Exodus archive, I've been able to revisit it on modern hardware. While I enjoy revisiting classics that I used to love back in the day, one thing I'm particularly fond of is trying new things that I never knew about back then. So today, I'm going to pick out a few recent MS-DOS gaming discoveries that I find rather interesting for one reason or another. I'm not necessarily saying that these games are good, rather that I simply found them intriguing and I wanted to talk about them a bit. So let's get right into it. Originally released in December of 1989 as part of Softdisk Publishing's Big Blue Disc subscription-based magazine on a disc service, Legends of Murder was developed by one Jamie Schmaltz, apparently with uncredited code editing by the one and only John Romero. It appears to be Schmaltz's first game, but he went on to have a rather prolific career in the games industry. Following the two Legends of Murder games, the latter of which released in 1991, Schmaltz founded Digital Extremes, with the company's first title being the widely beloved Epic Pinball. In the following years, he worked on a variety of titles, including Solar Winds, Jazz Jackrabbit, and several entries in the Unreal series. Legends of Murder's 4-colour CGA graphics and complete lack of any sound whatsoever are a far cry from the impressive visuals and soundscapes of Schmaltz's later work, but it's still an interesting game for several reasons. It's an intriguing blend of the role-playing and adventure genres, casting you in the role of the mysterious Inspector, who has arrived at Stonedale Castle in an attempt to determine who murdered the king. Gameplay in Legends of Murder involves moving the Inspector around a top-down representation of the castle, or in the second game a small town, and hunting for clues. Some clues are automatically revealed when you reach particular locations, while others require you to actively search the environment with the dedicated interface command. Anything you discover is relayed to you through some well-written atmospheric text, with occasional accompanying images. As you progress through the game, you'll occasionally get into fights with monsters, usually those which are guarding treasure chests. The combat system is extremely simplistic, consisting of nothing more than either attempting to hit your opponent or casting a spell, but it at least adds something of a sense of progression to the game as you explore. Further opportunities to progress your character come in the form of new weapons and armour, and various magical items that will either improve your stats or hinder you in some way. There is no way of knowing the effects of a particular item before using it for the first time, so thankfully you can save at any time. Legends of Murder is far from perfect. Some aspects, such as the fact you can get straight back up having been defeated in combat, then head right back in and attempt to hit your assailant over and over again until they keel over, presumably from sheer boredom, clearly haven't been thought through in depth. It's a little frustrating that interactive elements such as characters with whom you can converse and staircases aren't actually visible on the map, meaning you often have to fumble around in order to find them. And the final solution to the whole mystery in the first game doesn't appear to make a ton of sense either. Supposedly the second game is a bit better in this regard, but I'm yet to try that one at the time of recording. And yet despite all this, I can't help but like Legends of Murder. It's an interesting attempt to do something a bit different, and despite its limited tech, it creates a wonderful atmosphere throughout. Schmaltz has clearly put some effort into realising the story's overall setting beyond the walls of the castle in which the game unfolds, and that makes it an interesting world to explore. It's an intriguing proof of concept if nothing else, and it'd be fun to see someone else attempt to do something similar, perhaps with more fleshed out mechanics. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for computerized game shows, and 1991's Lexi-Cross, developed by Platinumware and published by Interplay, is one that I've come to be rather fond of. Rather than being an adaptation of an existing property, Lexi-Cross is an original creation with a fun sci-fi twist, in which you play as a human or alien character and can compete against either robotic computer opponents or an opponent sitting at the computer with you. It was designed by Peter Oliphant, whose work prior to entering the video games industry included making handheld electronic games at Mattel and playing the character Freddie Helper on The Dick Van Dyke Show. Oliphant sadly passed away in May of 2023, but I think we can all agree it sounds like he had a thoroughly interesting and fulfilling professional life. Lexi-Cross opens with you creating your player profile, which allows you to determine your planet of origin, birthday, gender and appearance. This takes the form of an interview with the show's cyborg producer. After this, you're into the game proper, which unfolds over the course of 3 rounds. Following the traditional game show formula, the amount of points you can win in each round gradually escalates, so it's possible to make a spectacular comeback in the final round if you play well. Lexi-Cross has several distinct components, combining elements of Battleship, Wheel of Fortune and Scrabble. Your basic aim in each round is to solve a puzzle by determining the correct word or phrase. There's work to be done before you can even attempt that though. On a player's turn, they can take several actions. The first of which they will want to do is reveal tiles on their personal board. Tiles can take one of 3 forms. They can be blank, which immediately ends the player's turn when revealed. They can be a letter space, which allows the player to reveal another tile, or they can be a special icon, which can be either beneficial or harmful to the player. If it is a harmful tile, that ends the player's turn. If it's a beneficial one, they can continue revealing. The aim when revealing tiles is to discover the spaces where words are supposed to go, as if you're gradually revealing the layout of a crossword. Unlike a conventional crossword, Lexi-Cross's boards don't necessarily have all the words joined up to one another, and there's actually no obligation to reveal all the word spaces if you don't want to. Once you've revealed some letter spaces, you can start picking letters. Upon choosing to pick a letter, you spin a wheel that determines the basic score value of correctly chosen letters. Like Wheel of Fortune, there are also several negative spaces, including Bankrupt, which causes you to lose all the points you've accumulated in this round, Lose Turn, which gives the other player 2 turns in succession, and End Turn, which simply passes play to the other player without penalty. Assuming you spin a numerical value, you can then pick a consonant. If that letter appears in the puzzle, you score points according to how many times that letter appears, and, like Scrabble, how commonly that letter comes up in words. Rarer letters will multiply the value shown on the wheel by various factors, potentially allowing for huge scoring opportunities if you find a relatively frequently occurring letter with a decent multiplier. To reveal vowels in words, you need to have located vowel tokens while revealing the tiles on the board. At any point, you can choose to see the clue for the puzzle and decide whether or not you want to attempt to solve it. The twist is that the clue is revealed as you successfully discover letters on the board, so there's kind of an extra layer on top of the typical Wheel of Fortune formula. Rather than simply attempting to guess the phrase, you have to guess the phrase and then figure out a word or phrase that is a suitable answer to it. Lexi-Cross is a lot of fun to play, and it's well presented, keeping up the illusion of playing in a futuristic game show throughout. The only thing that does make me raise my eyebrow a little is because it isn't beholden to the time constraints of a TV show, individual games can go on for quite a while. But this isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's interesting, enjoyable and unpredictable throughout, and that makes it a lot of fun, even if you don't end up winning. And I can see it being an absolute riot with a human opponent. I'll be honest, I tried this one from the Exodus archive entirely because of its gloriously silly title, coupled with its excellent tagline, "This money really is the root of all evil." Lethal Tender was released in 1993 and is the work of Pie in the Sky Software, who are arguably most well known for their shareware flight sim Corncob 3D. Lethal Tender grew out of a demo called Stop Nick Mackie and was the first title to use Pie in the Sky's Power 3D engine, a block-based raycasting engine similar to that seen in Wolfenstein 3D and the Catacomb series. Power 3D had a couple of extra tricks up its sleeve beyond what the Wolfenstein engine offered, however. Most notably, its walls weren't all the same size and shape. Power 3D allowed for angled walls at variable heights, making for more convincing, less boxy 3D environments, by 1993 standards anyway. It was also capable of variable light levels, actually accomplished by simply adjusting the game palette to be darker or lighter in certain areas. There are walls with transparent pixels that allow you to see through windows into different areas, and there's even an outdoor scene. In Lethal Tender, you're cast in the role of Nick Hunter, legendary super spy and all-action hero. Your mission is to prevent the dastardly Thorn Devereaux from carrying out his most diabolical plan to date, forging vast amounts of US currency, covering it in a highly explosive compound, and then coating it in an invisible substance that decays gradually, effectively making any of the treated currency a ticking time bomb. His aim? To completely destabilise the US currency by destroying trust in it. Oh, and perhaps obliterating a few city blocks and civilians in the process too. To that end, you're flown in by helicopter and dropped on the roof of a building near Devereaux's base of operations. From there, it's your job to find a way into the base proper, eliminate any resistance along the way, destroy the machinery that is creating the deadly compound, and then escape. If you happen to encounter Devereaux along the way, which I think you all know you will, then popping a bullet or 10 in the squishy bits probably wouldn't go amiss either. What then follows is a short, quite easy, fairly straightforward first-person shooter that I found surprisingly interesting. It's not what I'd especially call a good game, particularly compared to some of the other titles that were coming out around that period, but it definitely tries some admirable things and stands out as something other than a straight Wolfenstein 3D clone. One of the most notable inclusions is a locational damage system, whereby when you're hit, you take damage to various areas of your body, and this has an impact on various game elements. Getting hit in the leg affects your movement, for example, so that you move more slowly, or limp, constantly drifting to one side. Getting hit in the face, meanwhile, tints your vision red, making it harder to see what's going on. Rather amusingly, the damage indicator appears to suggest that taking sufficient damage actually blows that part of your body clean off, including your head, but you can safely reattach it and heal your damage using the first aid kit scattered around the place. This brings us to another interesting feature, the fact that Lethal Tender is quite heavily inventory based. Rather than automatically using items when you collect them, as in other first person shooters, Lethal Tender demands that you pick things up and add them to your inventory. Certain items will be used automatically. For example, if you pick up a first aid kit when you're injured, it will be immediately used. But otherwise, they're stored in an inventory bar across the bottom of the screen to be used when required. Pleasingly, the game pauses when you're rifling through your inventory, meaning it is practical to heal mid-combat if required. This inventory system also means you need to carry around important key items such as keys, access cards and memos with important information on them. Memos can be read too, which helps the game world feel a bit more fleshed out than some other games of this type from the period. You can also drop items anywhere and later retrieve them if you decide you might need them. This is important because every inventory slot you're taking up with a key is one you can't store extra ammunition or healing in. Lethal Tender supposedly features a stealth mechanic known as your profile, which is an invisible representation of how well you're blending into the environment. Moving quickly, firing your weapon, and otherwise behaving unpredictably raises your profile, causing guards to attack on sight. It's apparently possible to sneak past the guards by silently killing one and stealing their uniform, though I never actually got this to work, and just blasting through everyone seemed like the easiest approach. Lethal Tender is also noteworthy for featuring a coherent game world rather than a linear progression of levels. There is a loading break between different areas, but they're otherwise all interconnected, allowing you to go back and forth between them as you need to. Given the short length of the game, there isn't a lot of need to, but it is quite fun that the way you get back out of the base once you've completed your objective isn't quite the same as the route you took to get in there. You can beat Lethal Tender in about half an hour. There's really not a lot to it, and there's only 2 types of enemy in the game, both of whom are essentially uniformed dude with gun with a different colour palette each. But it is an admirable early experiment in doing something a little different with the first person shooter genre, and it certainly has a fun sense of character to it. It was followed up by a sequel known as Terminal Terror, and now I'm actually quite intrigued to give that a shot. And there you have it. It's always a pleasure to discover interesting new games like this, because while in some cases they may not be amazing titles in and of themselves, they can act as an excellent starting point for delving further into the careers of various developers, or simply understanding part of gaming history that you might not have looked at in much detail before. There are myriad other DOS games that I've never encountered before, so I'm sure I could make this video several times over, but we'll leave that there for today. So for now, it just remains for me to say, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.